Everyone. While people are dropping in from the main stage, I would like to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Pepijn van der Kamp. I have the pleasure of introducing today's session on how to bridge the gap between security specialists and developers, which is led by our pre-sales consultant Hugo Schoonewille from the Amsterdam office. So enjoy the session and feel free to ask any questions via the Q&A window on the right-hand side. We will try to address any questions that you might have during the session. So over to you, Hugo.
All right, thank you, Pepijn. Thank you, Pepijn, for the introduction. As he already said, my name is Hugo Schoonewille, and today, the next half hour, I will talk to you about how to bridge the gap between security specialists and developers. What we're going to talk about today are typical challenges that we at SIG have seen come across in the past 20 years that we've been around, assessing software and software security, and also possible solutions to these challenges. As Pepijn mentioned, please feel free to use the Q&A button in the session window on the right-hand side. He'll answer those questions directly, ask them to me, or store them for answering afterwards. So feel free to ask just anything. We'll do our best to get back to you as soon as possible. Without further ado, so what we've been doing in the past 20 years and what we've been seeing is an increased concern about security. Security has already been interesting and really important, but it's increasingly important, getting increasingly important these days. For example, in the news with the Log4j findings, for example. Things that come to you as easy as anything. Security specialists and developers try to often or always mitigate those risks, but there are struggles. There are struggles like security specialists that need to sometimes say no at the end of a development sprint, say no and feel like a gatekeeper. This is not a fun place to be. It's difficult also because it slows down development and makes sure that in the end you just lose speed, you lose velocity and increase the lead times on value delivery. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be there, although you need to be there to make sure that you have enough time to minimize the security risks.
Sorry, Hugo, to interrupt you.
Yes.
I think we still see your first slide.
I'm clicking through the slide, if it's all right, and I'm seeing now the first 3 bullets. Are you seeing those as well on the left-hand side, 3?
No, I think we still see the opening slide. Maybe you need to stop sharing and reshare again. Maybe that helps.
Let me do that. Sorry for that. PowerPoint slideshow. What do we see right now?
Yes. Please
right,
continue.
cool.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. It's good that you say. Okay, perfect. So what I've been talking about are the 3 steps that you see here on the left-hand side, right? Security specialists feel like a gatekeeper. They don't want to be a gatekeeper because it slows down development speed and velocity. And they need the time and expertise to minimize security risks. The time and expertise to minimize security risks, this is something that you, as a security specialist, cannot do by yourself alone. You need the attention of business as well. Those guys and girls need to give you the time and attention to actually make sure you have enough time to figure it out. On the right-hand side, we have the developers. And the developer, for example, I hope this now works, has issues, for example, in figuring out where to start. There's a lot of problems, a lot of tools, a lot of findings. And as a developer, you just need to manage all of them. You get everything at your plate. And yeah, there's just too many things to keep track of. Too many things to keep track of, next to the fact that not always, but sometimes developers do not have the security background. It's really difficult to figure out what is important and what's not important without proper guidance. If you do not have the guidance and the background, what do you start with? And how do you know what to do first? This eventually gets to the time and the problem of time that we discussed before as well. So how do we prevent and resolve issues without enough time? Security is increasingly important, but still, you just need time for it. And let's be honest, you do not want to be in the news with a security breach. You don't want to be there. So there needs to be a solution. The life of these 2 people, the security specialist and the developer, could be way easier. It could be way easier if both these people had, for example, a way to compare security with others. So how well am I performing, or is my landscape performing compared to others? So what can I do, and what can I do better? Where am I already performing all right? Or on the other hand, you have the developer that, as said before, needs or can definitely help use a helping hand in figuring out and identifying what findings and what risks should be identified and fixed first. Luckily, currently, we see more and more companies actually coming up with solutions to this. Solutions like, for example, applying a traditional top-down model where management decides both what and how, and developers decide on what to implement. This is not perfect, because developers, as you may know, are not allowed to actually do whatever they're best at. They're hired to develop code. And if you're going to decide what and how they're doing, as management, you're not giving them enough freedom, decreasing software quality, and overall decreasing developer happiness. You don't want to be there. On the far right-hand side, however, we also see, this is a more modern approach, the full development autonomy model, or developer autonomy model, where management only decides on what's happening, but developers decide on how, fully decide on how. While this sounds nice, and definitely if you're a developer, it is a nice place to be to get the entire freedom, it does not allow you as management for control. The resulting software will be better because developers can do what they're best at, but risks, key risks, are very difficult to manage. And as management, you want to manage those risks. You want to manage risks like technical debt, architecture, and what we're talking about today, specifically security. In the hybrid model that we see here in the middle popping up is management deciding on what and determining key topics and key policies to figure out, okay, what are we okay with, what should be fixed first, and what can be postponed afterwards. Developers then get full autonomy to implement that in line with those policies. So one place, one way, and one model to look at your entire portfolio and landscape. This does empower the developers for control and allows the management to control on key topics and policies as well. The resulting software will be great and the risks can be managed at the same time. This ideal situation that we see here in the middle can be visualized as follows before we actually go into the session and demo. What we see here, for example, you have a landscape of 40, 50, 60 different systems. And these systems, you have no idea or no clear picture on what their quality is, how easy they are maintainable, and how secure they are. What we would do is upload all your systems into Sigrid. And what Sigrid then does is analyzing those systems on the different risk categories. It identifies if an application is easy to maintain, if an application has a lot of security vulnerabilities or not, if an application has libraries in place that should be maintained or updated, or maybe even removed because of license risks. Things that you as a security specialist want to be on top of. As a security specialist at this moment in time and at this place in the software, you can configure or define the objectives you want to go after. Like, I want to have only high-risk security vulnerabilities to live in the software for at most 7 days, or track the findings over time and make sure that the system is getting better and better. This is what you want to go after. Especially for the medium and high-risk findings then, what you can do is analyze the risks a bit further. Go into the code, figuring out what the risks are on code level, get some comments next to it with CWE or CVE links to it. So you get a good feeling of how risky these particular findings are. This is the place where you as a developer then come into play, where a developer can start looking in the code or into the libraries and see how to mitigate the risks that are already existing and also prevent new risks from occurring. To manage data, security, and governance effectively, you basically have 3 steps to follow. 3 steps to follow, starting with scanning. Sigrid scans your entire landscape automatically on code and library level by using 20+ open source and closed source tools. We use things like, anything between SonarQube, but also open source help looking at library risks. The entire portfolio and the entire system is then seamlessly integrated into your landscape. You do not have to do anything. You don't have to configure it. It simply works. Next to that, after scanning, the system will rank your findings. It automatically curates, as Tibor already mentioned in the main stage, automatically curates and aggregates the findings and ranks them across our benchmark and standards. Standards like the OWASP Top 10 or CWE Top 25. Things that you may have as key policies in your organization and you want to live up to. And last but definitely not least, Sigrid will manage and mitigate security risks or help you do that by providing you with actionable recommendations into your software portfolio. You get code level feedback and comments to explain what's going wrong and what you can do to improve. It's that simple. Before going into the session itself and into the demo itself, what we see here is more or less the same thing as before, but then with some screenshots from Sigrid. Sigrid scans your software and curates and aggregates the findings based on the model. You see here the 10 different aspects of the OWASP Top 10 in the background, configuring and figuring out where your risks are, basically. It will help you rank your findings against the CVSS severity benchmark. Tibor briefly already introduced that before. The CVSS severity benchmark indicates impact and exploitability and puts that next to context of deployment, for example, whether or not a system is publicly facing. This means something entirely different from an internally deployed system. These things are taken into place or into play when looking at different risks. And again, finally, last but not least, the recommend step. Sigrid provides you with actionable recommendations, including code samples, giving you direct feedback, figuring out what to do, where, when, and why. So all in all, Sigrid is, and I've now been only talking about security, but a turnkey integrated platform, not only for security, but also maintainability, architecture, open source health, in providing you with continuous insight from the start, giving you insight in code quality, security on both a portfolio level and a system level. The one-stop shop, the one platform where you need to be for this. So let's think about and talk about an example. Say we are a developer, it's Monday morning, and on Monday morning, I actually start up my laptop. I open up my laptop, and what I do is I walk to the kitchen, I get a cup of coffee. I'm really happy about the coffee machine, though. I mean, I've been using this one for a while now, and I'm still really happy seeing the black gold dripping into the cup, basically. While I stand at the corner, at the counter, getting the coffee, I see a bunch of emails getting into my inbox. A bunch of emails that have already been there while my laptop is booting. Yeah, it gets me a bit, well, what is it? Disappointed, a bit tired, so to say, maybe even. It basically became a standard ritual every Monday morning since I moved to my new position as lead developer. I do like my work, though, because, well, our company has proper and fairly mature development process. We have a deployment pipeline with 5 or 6 tools for security, and also some security objectives. Objectives about no critical or high-risk findings in the categories A7 through A10 can be there in the OWASP Top 10, or no critical findings should outlive the week, should always be fixed within 7 days. Things that make you and us as a company pretty mature already. But yeah, while I walk back with a cup of coffee back to my desk, indulging on the aroma, what is the issue is that, well, what I've always found is with every new tool added to the platform, more work is added to it as well. I mean, with more work, there's more things to do. The amount of work multiplied. More findings to evaluate from more different tools, everything to log in separately. It's just a lot of work. And yeah, I know more tools have higher coverage, but more overhead as well in this case. It is a hell of a job to keep all the tools happy, and to make sure that my security specialist is always happy as well. I mean, the objectives that I mentioned before, like I don't want to have high-risk findings or critical findings in my applications, it's too much of a job, and there's just too little time. Imagine a platform overall that scans your application or application landscape using an even larger group of tools that we just discussed before, the 5 or 6 that we have implemented already, and gather the findings in one place, in one dashboard. Imagine having a platform that automatically ranks all the findings for you, a place where you could find actionable recommendations, and yeah, just a way where you can able to figure out further what to do, refine the findings, pick them up, and resolve them. This brings us to Sigrid itself, because the next morning I'm still logging in. I'm walking with my cup of coffee, so to say, back to my computer and making sure that, well, I type in sigridsales.com in the URL, and click on login, well, and browse my application landscape. What I see here already immediately is, and I've already known this, is we have 46 different systems, 46 systems that are measured in this case for maintainability. And yeah, I'm the lead developer of Hibernate, and Hibernate in this case is a critical system. So I'm really happy we're doing all right. We're still a market average, 2.7 more or less. So this is good. At least for maintainability, we're scoring all right. We're scoring all right for maintainability, and also over time, we do see that the maintainability did not drop or increase too much. Not much happened. So nothing to worry about at this place. We are here, however, for security, as you know. So let's see how security is performing on this application, and let's see how we're doing. So I go to the security tab. Again, only one place where I have to log in and to see all the findings of all the different tools together. And I see that there's 146 findings already. There's 146 findings, and 16 of them, yeah, were actually new since the last time. 16 new findings. Even though we resolved 57 of them, still we added the 16 new findings to it. What we see is, unfortunately, these 16 findings are not particularly grouped together. They are spread out over the different categories. We see new findings in A1, A3, 5, 6, and 8. And particularly the critical findings are the ones that we are most interested in. Remember the objective that we had before, where we did not want to have critical findings in the categories A7 through A10 for OWASP 10. We're now looking at OWASP 10, and we see that there is a category in which case we have 4 critical findings. We're going to fix them, or at least let's figure out what is the problem of these findings. So we're going into the A8 category of software and data integrity failures. And what we see here is an overview more or less similar to what we saw before, but then focused on the 5 findings that I've now found, the 5 critical and high-risk findings that you just saw. We see over time that 27 critical findings have been resolved, so we're on the right track, but we're not there yet. There's still 4 critical findings. The criticality of the findings, as you can see here on the right-hand side, is determined and showed by the CVSS severity benchmark, the unique insight that we provide together with the CVEs and the publicly available information and deployment type, sorry. For example, the public-facing or the internally deployed applications. We find that we have 4 critical findings. So let's see one critical finding, for example. I saw some questions like, what tools do we use? We have one here in place, which is called Find Segbugs. This is one that's actually running in the background, giving you insight in, for example, what's happening here. So let's see, we open up this tool. We open up this particular file and see the line where something is happening. In this case, the identified risk by the tool is given as an object deserialization is used in this particular line of code. So let's see. What do you think of this? Is this bad or not? The severity says a 9.5. We see it has already been there for 4 months, so it's not a new one. This makes it a bit more risky as well. And we see here some information on why this particular risk is a risk, why this particular thing needs attention and needs to be resolved. So I think it's relatively simple, but it's also relatively serious. So we need to fix it as soon as possible. Let's do that. Let's see, okay, let's edit the finding, put it on our list, and refine it. Say, okay, we're going to fix it immediately after we're done refining those 5 or 4 high-risk findings. So we go back to the overview, we go back to the second finding, and see this is more or less the same. You see it's the same kind of line, it's a different line in a different place in the code base, but still it is a 9.5, so we need to fix this as well. Probably a similar thing. Let me refine this one as well. Third finding. Let's see. So we had 2 findings from SIG bugs, and hey, we have another finding here. So the nice thing about software security with using Sigrid is that all these tools, in this case we see to find SIG bugs and ModSF, are just gathered together. You have one overview of everything together. You do not have to go into the different tools and see whether or not it makes sense. There's just one place. So we open up this one, we see the line of code, we get a remark on what's happening here and why this is a problem. And yes, we want to fix this one as well. So let's do that. Let me add this one. Going back to the overview, we see that the 4th finding is more or less the same as the ones before, but just a different file. So I'll leave it that is for now. But the 5th finding, the last one, is an interesting one. The last one here is a finding that comes from yet another source. In this case, SIG's open source health tool. SIG's open source health tool looks at the third-party libraries, looks at the security vulnerabilities. In this case, this is the reason why this library is actually popping up, but also at, for example, how old these libraries are and if there are any legal risks in them. This, however, does require a different process, so we're not going into this right now, and I'm going to park this one because I want to discuss this with my security manager and security specialist in a meeting that we usually have every week. Talking about that meeting, it is already almost time. We have half an hour left for that meeting, so what I'm going to do now is figure out and fix the findings that I have here. Let's see if I can get the first one fixed before the actual session starts. So we go back to the overview, and in this case, I'm going to filter on the findings that I just refined. I'm going to find only the findings and only the findings that I want to fix right now. Do this, and we see immediately everything updating. We see the graph updating. We see that there is only 3 categories left, of which the last one, the A8, software and data integrity failures, is the one which needs most attention. So what we can do now is find the files that we have here in your IDE and start fixing them. How nice would it be if we could say to my security specialist already in half an hour that we fixed something in this Monday morning? That would be cool, right? So this is a way of using Sigrid software security. It is an important way to actually use the platform and make sure that you get the most out of it. We've been looking at the platform providing you with 20+ tools and 5,000+ rules that are curated by our security experts and presented to you in an easy-to-use dashboard. On a portfolio level, you get an insight in where your risks are and what applications are most critical. It gives you quick trends on a high level to indicate which application needs first attention and which applications are doing all right. And on the more detailed level, as we just saw before, you can actually select and rank for compliance. We've now been looking at OWASP top 10 only, but the system provides you with other features like the ISO 5055, CWE top 25, and PCI DSS version 4. Everything to match your security policies. The unique severity benchmark graph on the top right-hand side provides a quick overview of the security findings, including their deployment type. So it's not only an opinion, it's really a way to say, okay, this is important, we need to start looking at this. This is also important, but a little bit less. And we can only spend our hours once. So we need to figure out what to do first. And definitely not, but last but not least, we have the overview of the findings. In this case, they are, again, grouped on OWASP Top 10, and you can group them on any model, just to give an insight and get an overview of where, in what categories your risks lie, and what you should do to actually fix them first. Together, this provides you the security without headaches. It's the security that for a security specialist gives the immediate insight in the most pressing security issues, and for a security developer, insight and deep dives with prioritization and guidance to fix. This is just the one-stop shop, the one place, the one single source of truth, bridging the gap between the two roles that we've been talking about today. So this means that Sigrid Software Security, as we've been talking about today, is the one platform, the one single source of truth, the clear prioritization of issues, and easy to use for all teams.